But yeah, let's talk about operating the drone. These things have gotten so much easier to fly. They used to be a little bit aggravating. I bought my first drone that I had in, I think it was like 2016, 2017. I got a DJI Phantom 3. Not a bad drone. But if you had one of those older drones and you were flying, within like past 5 miles from your previous location, or you were at a new location, what was the first thing you had to do to them? You had to calibrate the compass. Have any of y'all ever had to manually calibrate a compass of a drone? It's kind of, you spin it around, yep. But see, I wasn't smart enough to do that. See, I held mine out and just went in circles. And I'm telling y'all, this is a confidence booster if you're worried about taking the FAA Part 107.
You got a 97?
97 actual, 100 hypothetical. But yeah, but they wouldn't calibrate, they were aggravating. And I would try to calibrate that thing and I'd have it and I'd just be spinning in circles and I would get sick. And then somebody, finally, kind of like he was saying, they came over and they said, why don't you take it and kind of, I was like, damn. That's a good idea. But you would have to spin it in one direction and you would have to spin it in the other direction and hopefully it calibrated. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. If it flew away, that it probably didn't, right? GPS is so much better on these things now. You can honestly and reliably let GPS fly these things autonomously and they're going to do what they need to. If I'm going out and we're doing a demo or maybe we're doing like a paid job for somebody and we're going to fly a site for them, or we're scanning, a roadway for like a car crash or something, you literally can just go on, plan your flight, tell the drone to take off, it takes off, it goes and does its thing, and then it comes back and lands. The only time you may have to have any human intervention is if you're running into a problem and you've got to avoid something. Maybe an aircraft comes into where you're flying and it's a little too close, something like that. These things will fly themselves now. Just about 100%. I am a very good drone watcher. I don't do a lot of piloting because that would involve manual control of the sticks, but I can watch the hell out of one, right? I've only had a few problems so far. And that was back on some of the older hardware. So these things will fly themselves now. There's apps on your phone you can use. If you buy a drone like a DJI, come with flight planning software now. If you buy one from us, it's going to come with like Q ground control. A lot of the other platforms you can buy use Q ground control. And it's as easy as going to your computer, your phone, your tablet, something, and just kind of drawing a box around where you want to fly. Tell it you want it to fly at this altitude with this spacing, and then sending it. So it's gotten a lot better. All right, as far as airspace is concerned, for your Part 107 test, this is something that you'll have to kind of learn how to decipher. It looks really confusing, it looks really blotched up, but once you kind of figure out what is what and how to look at it and figure out what you're looking at, these are almost free questions as far as the test is concerned. It may tell you, I can't see the name of the airport, but we'll call that airport. Probably is one. It may ask you what kind of runway is at that airport, and it'll give you the location, you find it, and you're looking at it, and there's the runway. All you have to do is go back in the book to the key for all this and just pick out what this symbol represents, look back at your questions and your answers, and if what you think you just saw as far as the symbol matches A, B, or C, that's a pretty good indicator that you might want to click on that one. All right, a lot of these are free questions once you figure out what you're looking at and how to decipher it. That's what you're going to do for your test. Now, if you're going to do anything in the real world as far as flight planning and getting airspace authorization and all that, you're going to use something like an app on your phone with OpenSky. This one isn't bad. I've used OpenSky and I used a Loft. Both of them are extremely easy, very user-friendly, and they're very quick. You can get airspace authorizations, as quick as 30 seconds now. If you don't fly them, just remember to cancel them, especially if you're doing a lot of them on demos saying, see, look how fast I can get authorization. All right, remember to cancel them if you're not flying them. But the process for this is you just open your app up. A lot of them will figure out where you're at. If you are at the site you're wanting to fly, half the battle's already over. If you are not at the site and maybe you're going the next day or 2 or 3 days later, all you have to do is, it's like Google Maps. You just scroll on the screen till you find where you want to fly at, and then you just punch on the screen, and that's going to bring up this little target. Then it's going to tell you kind of what airspace you're in. You're going to enter in your information, your Part 107 number, where you want to fly at, what date, how long, what altitude, and stuff like that. When you get through, you're going to click Submit, and then it's going to come up probably near instant that you have authorization to fly. Any LANC-enabled airport, which is the Low Altitude Automatic Notification Center, probably. The letters fit, but LANC is anything that you're going to get automated approval for. And if it's telling you that your authorization is automatic for up to 400 feet, that's letting you know that in this section you can get that automatic authorization for any altitude up to 400. And it's going to be within about 15 to 30 seconds. Now let's say that you're surveying somewhere and maybe you can only get 50 feet clearance automatically because you're near an airport, but you need to fly at 150 feet. You can still submit that request and get it back pretty quickly. You can do it if it's a LANC-enabled airport. You can still do it through an app like this, or you can go to the FAA's Drone Zone website, and you can go through the process to obtain your authorization that way. And it works very fast, and you'll still get pretty quick access. Weather, when you're trying to figure out whether or not you want to fly, UAV Forecast is a great app. That's going to give you really accurate weather information without you having to look it up from like an airport. And it's going to give you things like, if it's clear, it's going to tell you what the wind is. If you think you're usually flying at 150 to 200 feet, you can set that to where it gives you the wind and the wind gust at that elevation or that altitude. It's going to give you the precipitation probability, your visible satellites, cloud cover, your visibility, and you can program it to where if it's not meeting in what you need it to, it'll automatically pop up and tell you that you might not want to fly that day. It's going to come up and say not good to fly, other than good to fly. So it makes it really easy as far as trying to pre-plan and know when you're going to fly somewhere, when you're going to get your authorizations and all that good stuff. All right, if we're going to fly the drone, even if we're flying it autonomously, we've still got to make a flight plan. So we've got to tell the drone what we want it to do. That's going to be determined by what you're trying to do. So let's say if you're just out in the woods and you're trying to get a topographic survey and you've got a wide open field, you may fly at a higher altitude and a higher spacing. And what I mean by spacing is that's the actual line that the drone is going to fly. So it's going to fly one line, and then it's going to go over X amount of feet, and it's going to fly another line, and it's going to collect its data that way. You're going to input all that as far as your flight planning software. What would determine that is, if you're a little bit higher, you can get a wider coverage area, like here on the right. If you're a little bit lower, you're going to get a little bit more narrow of a coverage area with LiDAR or photo. All right. A good rule of thumb as far as LiDAR at least, if we're trying to get through real thick tree canopy, about 20 to 25 meter spacing, which is about 70-ish, 75 feet, somewhere in there, is about what you want to be spaced at. That way you're going to get a lot more photos or a lot more LiDAR in the area that you're trying to get through to. And that just kind of shows you how that would look. Here on the left, we've got a little bit wider of a spacing, and on the right, we've got a little bit tighter of a spacing. And you can do this with most programs. You can import your KML into some of these flight softwares, and it'll pull it up for you, and then you just enter in the parameters. That makes life a lot easier as well. All right, as far as some of the platforms that you might use, we have our drone that you'll look at in a second. You may have drones that are like just these fixed wings that are just camera drones. Some of these, especially the Wingtra, if you've got like 1,000 or plus acres that you need to do, those work really good for that. On our services side, we do have a Wingtra that we use for some of the jobs, especially out. We've got a guy out west as far as Arizona, and he does a lot of desert scans. The Wingtra is perfect for that. You've also got some that have like the LiDAR attachments. You've got several different models with LiDAR attachments. And if you just want to start small and see how it's going to work for you, there's nothing wrong with picking up like a Skydio 2 or something like that. Even some of the DJI drones that cost a little bit less but have a pretty good camera on them. And you can kind of start testing the waters with photogrammetry. And you're just going out and you're doing ortho photos. And that's a good way to kind of dip your toes into the drone world without spending, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars at once. Here's a warning with that. The Skydio 2, you probably can pick up anywhere from like $1,500 to, you know, $2,500, depending on what all your accessories is. But in school, you know, during Red Ribbon Week, they warned you about gateway drugs, right? You know, don't do the lower stuff because that's going to lead you to the harder stuff, right? You're going to start out, you know, with a candy cigarette, and by the end of the school year, you're going to be dropping acid, right? That's how they made it out. These are gateway drones. You buy a smaller drone, you start looking at it, and you see how well it works. It's going to lead to bigger, more expensive drone purchases. I can almost guarantee it. How do I know that? I have been victimized by gateway drones. And it wasn't even anything as nice as a Skydio. I went out one year, my son for his birthday wanted this little toy drone. It was like maybe $100. It was fairly good size. I had never saw one before. I'd never flown one before. So we get it, he opens it up, he's all, you know, happy on his birthday. Let's charge it up and fly it. All right, yeah, let's do that. So we charge it up. I said, I need to show you how this works, and then I'll give the controller to you, right? It didn't happen like that, though. I pick it up, and I'm showing him how to do, it's like this little trick drone, so I'm showing him how to do all these flips and turns, and, you know, we're flying it. It's got like a 5-minute battery life, and he keeps asking to fly it. And I'm like, just wait your turn. So I fly it all of its extensive 5-minute battery life. And I said, oh, okay, well, we're going to recharge it, and I'm going to get you on the next one, right? It still didn't work out like that. And I crashed it on the second time because it wasn't GPS. A gust of wind came by and, you know, went to the side of the house. So needless to say, I had a disappointed 8 or 9-year-old that day. But I told him, I said, you know, we'll get it. We went back, we got him another one, and I did let him fly it. I'm a good person. So after I tested that second one to make sure it was good to go, I gave him the controllers. But that one drone purchase, you know, 6 months later, I was shelling out like $700 or $800 for that Phantom 3 because it had the 4K camera and everything on it. And just to be a nice person, since he let me fly his drone, I didn't let him fly mine. But these will lead to other drone purchases when you see how easy this stuff is and how much it's going to improve, you know, your workflow and how much faster you're going to get stuff done. What you may see on a typical drone setup, if you've got one that does LiDAR, you're probably going to have, well, you're definitely going to have a LiDAR sensor if it does LiDAR, right? You may or may not have a camera. You may have one that you can do the interchangeable payloads on, so you may have a LiDAR sensor. On this flight, you may switch it out with a camera. You may have one that's got both on there at the same time. But you're going to have usually a flight system GPS, so you can fly it with GPS. And for LiDAR, especially, you're probably going to have some kind of GNSS antenna on there to where it's collecting that positional data as well. And if you get a little hung up on GNSS or corrections and all that, here in a second, we've got something to kind of explain what that is and what you need to look for and how it works and all that good stuff. Let's see, you're also going to have some kind of a internal measurement unit package. One word of caution that I will give you on any drone whatsoever, it is South Carolina. It doesn't get that cold, but when it gets cold, right? You can fly drones in colder weather. I flew our SmartDrone Discovery 2 on a demo in Tennessee. It was like 27, 28 degrees. And the guy asked me, he came up and he said, "Will this drone work good in cold weather?" And I said, "The drone does fine in cold weather. The drone pilot is a little aggravated." To make that happen, though, it's a good idea on what any drone that you have, put the battery in, power it on, let it sit there for a few minutes. You probably can find it in your specs on the drone that you buy, but give it a little bit of time with that battery on so that IMU warms up a little bit. Because if you try to take off in cold weather and that's still cold, you could have the drone do crazy things, including flip over. I have seen that happen, not on ours, but we did try to launch a Phantom when it was a little bit too colder, and it went up about 3 feet, and then it like completely did a turn and then came straight back down. And I looked at it, and I looked at the other guy that was with me, and I was like, "What'd you do?" And he was like, "You've got the controller." No, I don't, because I made 100 on my test. Hypothetically. That wouldn't happen, right? This is your fault. So make sure that you just put some electricity to that drone, let that IMU warm up, and that's going to prevent problems like that.
The IMU is an inertial measurement?
Yep.
And it's got a bunch of gyroscopes you have to spin up?
Yeah, it's got stuff in there. It just needs to warm up a little bit. Usually we'll plug our battery in for usually like maybe 10 minutes, and that's good enough to get everything warmed up, and then it'll take off pretty good from there.